From Photonics Media, this is the podcast that takes listeners inside the physical science of light as we explore groundbreaking and industry-shaping progress in lasers, optics, imaging, metrology, and sensing. Each episode, our hosts welcome optics and photonics luminaries, rising stars, and market leaders for robust discussion about the trends shaping the field of photonics. From research and development to commercial innovation, we're on the air for unparalleled insight, offered on All Things Photonics. All Things Photonics is brought to you by PolyScience and Lumencor.
Today's episode is brought to you by PolyScience. For over 60 years, the PolyScience line of award-winning temperature control equipment has been helping the photonics industry reach its goals safely and efficiently. Our products are made in America and delivered globally. Please visit polyscience.com to learn how we can help you. Changing the world of chillers is more than a tagline. It's part of our history. Today's episode is also brought to you by Lumencor. Lumencor excels in the manufacture of technical lighting, scanners and imagers, and metrology. Visit us at lumencor.com to see how we can best support your new products and OEM production.
This is Mike Wheeler, Editor-in-Chief at Photonics Media. The annual general meeting of the European Photonics Industry Consortium, EPIC, attracts some 300 C-level attendees from photonics companies headquartered in Europe. Playing host to this year's AGM was the idyllic Juan-le-Pen in the south of France, known for its long sandy beaches and seafront promenade. Over the course of 3 days in April, photonics luminaries discussed innovation, entrepreneurship, and the challenges and trends in industry. My colleague Matt Beebe and I had the distinct privilege of attending this year's AGM. The presentations and breakout meetings provided an opportunity to network with leading visionaries in photonics today. We'd like to extend special thanks to EPIC Managing Director Carlos Lee and his talented team for including us in what was undoubtedly a first-class event. Which brings us to our opening. In 2 fireside chats, Carlos speaks with luminary figures about pertinent topics facing the industry. The first chat, with HÜBNER Photonics' Elizabeth Illy, who also co-chairs EPIC's Sustainability Board, spotlights the importance of sustainability in today's organization and document HÜBNER's commitment to that goal. Second, Carlos talks with Beate Sauter, CEO of semiconductor diode laser maker Lumics. Sauter offers her first-hand experience rising through the ranks and Lumics' unique management infrastructure and how decisions are made. All Things Photonics visits the EPIC AGM in part 1 of this episode, up next.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for joining this in little fire chat. You know, we had just a nice presentation with the 350 people of the EPIC AGM here in beautiful Juan-le-Pen. But let's also document a little bit for our listeners and viewers what we talked about sustainability. So you're the chair of the EPIC Sustainability Working Group, one of the co-chairs.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for volunteering with that.
Yeah.
And your presentation was about how you have been through that experience. But first, a few intro about yourself and the company.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Illy. I'm the head of marketing at HÜBNER Photonics, and we make lasers, high-performance lasers. And basically, the talk was on our journey to making sustainability.
So let's go at the beginning. Why did you embark on sustainability? Was it something that was imposed? Somebody your boss told you? Where did it come from? Why did you do it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think the thing is, in Sweden and in our company in general, everyone is very passionate about sustainability. And for years, we've had an environmental policy. And that came and stemmed from, when we saw that people in Sweden at the company do lots of recycling, and then we were buying electricity from renewable energy sources, and I was like, yeah, let's do it.
So that's value-based?
Very much so.
Okay.
Let's make an environmental policy so we can show off these good initiatives, because I think that's where you've got to start, show off that you're doing this and you're making.
So in addition to the values, were there other factors or what would encourage Cobalt or all the other photonics companies to go into a sustainability program? Is there more than just that?
Well, just now, then, of course, you've got the EU directive. So this is the
EU directive, so at some point you will have no choice, maybe.
Exactly. And I think, as much as that seems like reporting and hassle, I think at the end of the day, it's actually going to be a good thing. So you're going to have to review all of your routines and processes and see where you can make things more efficient and more environmentally friendly. And I think at the end of the day, it's actually going to be a good thing.
So a good thing, efficiency and all of that. That's what about the financial aspect? Because Europeans are always concerned about we have to be cost competitive. So the
Exactly,
financial maybe
absolutely, yeah. But that has to be taken into account. And I mean, if you follow the guidelines that they suggest, then you actually have to weigh up all of these factors within these three pillars. So you've got your social pillar and your economic pillar, and then you've got your governance. The economic and governance, and then you've got your environment. So those three pillars have got to be balanced out. So of course you're not going to do initiatives that are going to cost you money or not to make the balance sheet good at the end of the day. It has to actually make sense for the company.
How can the EPIC working group on sustainability help the companies?
Yeah, in the meantime, I mean, the whole idea of sort of my story and the experience was really within this work group to put some tips and tricks and some links to help the small companies actually know what are we supposed to focus on and who do we turn to, so that there's one portal there with all the information basically to help them.
One portal and sharing. And your presentation was very well received. We had all of those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for volunteering the time that we all learn collectively, we share collectively, so that together as an industry can be sustainable and promote photonics. Thank you very much for that, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
So thank you very much for joining me, Beate, on this fire chat, a little bit discussion about your position as a CEO of Lumics company. So first of all, for the viewers or the readers who don't know about Lumics, what do you do?
So Lumics is a diode laser company. So actually we are making diode laser components, mostly in the near infrared. And what is a little bit particular about Lumics is that we cover the entire value chain. So we are one of the really few companies in Europe who have a semiconductor laser chip fab in-house.
To put a little bit of context, when was the company created, where based, how many employees?
Yeah, so the company was founded in 2000, originally with the idea to go into the telecom market. So when telecom crashed, Lumics had a little bit to reinvent the entire portfolio. And we are about 70 people now. We are part of a bigger company group, Berlin Industrial Group. And most of what we do nowadays is either going into a lot of medical applications or industrial applications.
Is one of the growing markets, or what are your main markets?
So our main market is really the medical market. The medical market contributes with about 2/3 to our revenue. So this is really our pillar number one.
Okay, enough about the company. Yourself, Beate, you're not a newbie in the company. You've been there for a while, but now you're the CEO. But that is not how you started. So tell us a little bit about, tell us a little bit also how you got into photonics. What is your background, personal background? What got you into photonics?
Oh, how I got into photonics? That is not for a 5-minute fire chat. This is a long story.
So what is your experience with Lumics, and then how did that transition move into a CEO?
Yeah, so I work in photonics already since more than 25 years for different companies, both European companies and American companies. I started in 2013 with Lumics. I was originally responsible for the sales and marketing there. And since 2000, I still have to count that, since 2022, I am the CEO of the company.
Okay, it's a shared management, I understand.
It's a shared management, yes. So we are 2 CEOs. So my colleague Dennis is supporting me, particularly with the finance side, which is also a really important side, particularly for small businesses. And I am more focused on the sales and marketing, but also on the technology side of the company.
Yes, I have been to some German companies. You have these 2 Geschäftsführer. I say, but who is the boss? And they say, well, we both are the bosses, and that's how you split the roles.
Exactly. It's also kind of mentally a backup, because you are not alone. You can discuss on that very high level. You can discuss management topics and so on.
But it's not the most common structure. I mean, most of the companies that we work with, or members of EPIC, they have a single CEO. So what are the pros and cons do you find? So you already mentioned one pro is that you have somebody who is next to you, can talk. Any disadvantage, or how do you see about this co-management?
Well, of course, you have to be aligned. So it's not only your decision, so you have to be aligned, because particularly when talking or making difficult decisions, and approaching the employees with maybe difficult decisions, you need to speak with the same words. So you need to be aligned. So you first have to come to a decision together. It's not your only one, and then you present it to either internally or externally.
I fully understand it, because even at Epic, although I'm the CEO, we have a CEO, but frankly, don't tell her, but I consider her equally the same level. The whole team reports to her, and we have to be fully aligned. So in any case, no matter the hierarchy, we have to be fully aligned in the management structure. And in addition to that, just taking, becoming the CEO, did that bring any challenges that you did enjoy, or challenges that you did find, oh, this is really a tough one? That you can tell us.
I truly enjoy being the CEO of the company, because I'm on a mission. I want to make Lumics a very successful company. So this is the ideal job for me. What is challenging is particularly for a company like Lumics, who is growing very fast at the moment, the thousands of operational questions and tasks that come up in your daily work. It's a positive stress, but still it is a challenge.
On weekends, when we're away from the desk, the lab, and the shop floor, and when we're excited enough about a film to shell out the cash for tickets and popcorn, we'll often take part in one of the world's all-time favorite applications of photonics technology: cinema. Innovations in cinema have mainly been seen from behind the camera. Innovation in lenses and lighting and cameras have certainly been welcome, but often ignored, however, is what brings the picture to the silver screen: the projector. For so many years, the projector remained mostly the same: a device with a reel, lamp, and lens. Our second guest today is among those who brought a noticeable jump in picture quality to the theater, using lasers in place of a bulb to project an image, and he recently received major recognition for doing so. Greg Niven, of Kyocera SLD Laser, was recently awarded an Individual Technical Achievement Award by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. More plainly, Niven was awarded a technical Oscar. In our interview, we'll talk to Niven about the work that led to the recognition, where to get the best cinematic experience, and, of course, the recent ceremony recognizing this contribution to cinematic technology. News editor Joe Williams speaks with Academy Award winner Greg Niven up next.
So first of all, congratulations on the award. It's incredibly exciting to see photonics innovations recognized in a setting like the Academy Awards. I'd like to start by going over some of the background. What led to this recognition? What are some of the problems that you were trying to solve in projection systems? And how lasers serve to address those issues.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, because most people these days are kind of forget that a lot of the revolution in this stuff started with the advent of micro display projection, which was back in the 90s. And so this is where, you'd get instead of plugging your computer into the TV, so to speak, and getting rid of your overhead projector, you started to get those digital projectors that you would have in the meeting rooms. And again, they used to be super expensive, but inside of those, there was what they called like a micro display device. And they started off with quite low resolution, and they had a couple of different varieties of them, but one of the ones that became very popular was by Texas Instruments. And it was called the DLP, or the digital light processor, or they called it like a micro mirror display, but they had these little tiny mirrors. And so back in 2002, believe it or not, those TI DLPs and other micro displays started to become very, very popular in rear projection TVs. And so, interestingly, in that time frame, that was supposed to be the first high volume application of high power visible lasers. So back in those days, there's lots of applications for high power, or sorry, for low power visible lasers, such as laser pointers and all sorts of things like that, laser levelers and whatnot. Lots of high volume, low power applications, but no high volume, high power application for visible lasers. And so again, the idea was to use the lasers as a light source for these digital projectors. And it started with the rear projection TVs because they were selling 5-6 million of them a year at the time. But then also incubating along with that were the cinema guys. And in particular with the cinema guys, their problems were actually more severe than the sort of smaller projection devices at the time, because they had very short lifetimes of their lamps, and like, for example, just like 1,000 hours. And they also had much more severe brightness issue than the other people had. So the cinema guys, first of all, wanted to go digital because they wanted to get rid of film, which was a huge cost for them. So even though the lamp-based digital projected image was actually considered to be somewhat worse than the film-based image, they went digital anyways just to get rid of the cost of the film. And so what was happening is that, again, started in 2002, the cinema guys were also much, much more complicated than the TV guys, because they had all these rules and regulations regarding color gamut and all sorts of crazy things to worry about that the TV guys and the digital projection guys didn't have to worry about with their stuff. So again, the big problems that they're trying to solve in projection systems always boiled down to brightness, lamp lifetime, color, things like this.
Awesome. Now, compared to traditional projectors, how do those based on lasers work? What are the key differences and advantages?
Yeah, so if you start off with the very basics of this, the lamps would be considered to be like a continuous spectrum of white light. So in a digital projector, what they would do, they'd take the white light, they would break that into 3 separate colors by using color filters. So you get the red, the green, and the blue. You get your primary colors. So I get my 3 primary colors. I have 3 micro displays, each generating a red, a green, and a blue image. And then I recombine them to make my resulting projected image. So one of the key differences between the lamps and the lasers is that the lasers will start off with that primary color, the red, the green, or the blue. So you don't have to break them up like you do with a white light source to begin with. So the lasers have this huge advantage that you're generating the primary color directly, which means that you're not filtering, like, they have this white light, and I'll just take 3 tiny little segments out of this broad spectrum, which again is why they had such problems with brightness and things like this. They're only taking a small amount of the light that's available from a lamp. Now, the other big thing is the lamp is a point source. And in particular with a cinema lamp, it's a xenon lamp. And a xenon lamp, when you get to these high power levels, is literally a plasma ball. So it's not just like your run-of-the-mill light that you have in your ceiling or something like this. This is like a plasma ball that's sparked with high voltage. And again, the lifetimes are not super long. You got these massive electrodes that are carrying massive amounts of current. And with this point source, the light, it's like a little sun. It's like the light's just going everywhere. So as a result, you have to collect this light. If I used my laser terminology, the étendue is terrible. And so when you're collecting this light, you'll put on these big reflectors behind this plasma ball, and you'll be trying to end up focusing that down onto this tiny little micro display. Now, lasers, by contrast, we all know, have excellent aton do. They come in a beam. And so you can leverage that aton do to get smaller optics, to get higher brightness. You can develop a projector with better F numbers, and they have a concept called the modulation transfer function, or the MTF. Now, the MTF of a projector with a lamp is relatively poor, and you're struggling to get all that you can out of this. With a laser, of course, again, the laser, it comes in a nice laser beam. In essence, I have to dumb the laser down to get it onto the micro display. I have to expand the beam as opposed to try to collect the light. So now all of a sudden I get this better MTF. I get much better sharpness. I get much better contrast. I get much better clarity of the pixels that are projected from this. And then the other big thing that was difference and advantage with the lasers was that the lasers can be fiber coupled. So again, we're all kind of familiar with the fact that a laser can be fiber coupled from telecommunications and fiber optics and whatnot. Like a lamp literally is impossible to do that with, unless you want to lose 99.99% of the power. So the interesting thing about the fiber coupling is that you can now locate your lasers remotely from your actual projector head. So two of the leading projector makers, which were IMAX and Dolby, did just that. So they already have racks of equipment in a theater, sound equipment and content management and all the rest of it. So in this rack, they now just throw in a couple of more modules in the rack with the lasers in them, and then have the fibers running to the projector head. So now your projector head can be completely redesigned to leverage the advantages of the lasers. And again, this is what the more advanced people like IMAX and Dolby did. And they actually also won Technical Academy Awards because they created literally the best possible projectors that you could make. Something that was literally impossible to do with a lamp. Some of the projector makers were not that innovative, quite honestly. They were more interested in just some of the more sort of benign advantages, but important, like longer lifetime, lower cost of ownership, and higher brightness and things like this. Some of the projector makers would just keep this, if my lamp is here and my projector is here, they would keep the lamp-based projector stuff basically the same, and they would just take out the lamp and insert a laser module and would not actually get the most out of the lasers. Yes, they would get better color, better lifetime, etc. But if you change that projector optics part of it also, that's when you'd really come up with something special.
Excellent. To sort of build on that, to give us some perspective on the advancement and its ubiquity, where can we find the technology now? I mean, both the more advanced version that you mentioned with IMAX and Dolby, and then sort of the more basic version of it where they're just swapping out the lamp for the laser module.
Yeah, this is pretty funny. I'll give you a funny story on the background of this too, because back, like I say, I started this stuff basically in 2002. At the time, I was working at one of the major laser companies, one of the major commercial laser companies. I won't name names to keep the people innocent. But I remember at the time going to the CEO of the company and saying, at some point in time, lasers are going to take over the cinema projection market. And we should invest in these technologies. And the company I was working for at the time had an interesting high-power visible laser technology that could be made at scale to achieve a relatively low cost. Then there was another company, at the time it was called Novolux, which later became Nexel, who I ended up going to work for. And I told the CEO they should buy this company and buy out their technology. And then there was a couple other interesting incubating technologies at the time. But in particular, I was very compelled by the technology that Novolux had. And our CEO, to make a long story short, didn't go for it. He just did not believe that lasers were ever going to be in a cinema. And he wasn't the only one, by the way. There was a variety of the senior managers that weren't believers. But it's so funny, though, because I was convinced that it was going to hit. So in 2006, I went to work for Novolux and started to basically work full-time trying to develop these high-powered visible laser markets. And so, believe it or not, so by 2012, we had the first commercial installations starting. And those were like beta sites. So in other words, like 1 or 2 type cinemas, you know what I mean? Not a lot. But the rollout started aggressively in 2014. And that's when like the sales at Nexel, which is now the new Novolux, started to really ramp up. And then now if I fast forward to 2024, they do not sell lamp-based projectors anymore. So you will only be able to buy, there's only a few companies that sell cinema projectors, by the way. You've got Barco out of Belgium, you've got Christie out of Canada, US, you've got NEC out of Japan, and you've got Sony out of Japan. But basically, Christie and Barco dominate probably 80% of the sales. And they don't sell lamp-based projectors anymore. They only sell laser-based projectors. So once it started to convert, and again, once all the theater owners realized that they're not spending thousands of dollars every month to replace these crazy xenon lamps, it switched super quick. So it's quite interesting. So then what would happen then too? So either people are buying the new laser-based projectors that are completely redesigned. Like I mentioned before, you had the projector optics and you have the light source. Some people completely redesigned that. And then some people made a conversion kit. So again, you just pull out the lamp module, put in a laser module, and kind of keep what you basically had before. And so probably I would say, because it's more cost effective to do that lamp replacement with a laser module, probably like, more like 70% of the people are doing that. And probably about 30% of them are replacing everything. And when I look at if I had to sort of pick my favorites, there's several ones that are pretty darn good that are harder to find. So the best ones that I like are what I would call the institutional IMAX theaters. So those are the IMAXs that have the big 4:3 aspect ratio, almost like a square screen, like the giant screens. And so, for example, locally, I'm in the Bay Area. So locally, you would get one of those at the Metreon in San Francisco. Like in New York City, like the Lincoln Theater in New York City has one. I mean, again, there's not very many of them. There's like about 250 of them worldwide. And those have the best version of the laser projector with the best color, best contrast, best sharpness, massive image, super bright, you name it, it's got it. And then behind that, though, then IMAX has started to swap out all their lamp-based projectors in their local multiplexes, which are, there's a couple thousand of those worldwide. So those are also very good. Then the other ones, though, my top two, so the IMAX institutional, then Dolby has rolled out about 250 cinemas worldwide. Again, there's one in downtown San Francisco in the same Metreon complex. But if you look around, you'll find Dolby cinemas where they have extremely high contrast. And again, just amazing color, clarity, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, the Dolby ones have their advanced, surround sound, new version type thing that are also make the movie going experience really fantastic. So those would be my two favorites, for sure.
Awesome. What was it like to, kind of see that in action, going to those types of cinemas and, seeing a movie, with this new technology, incorporated into it?
Yeah, it's just like so as a laser guy, it's very rare to actually like see your product in action, you know what I mean?
Right.
So the one thing that I used to do, which was a total blast, was because I got 4 kids, right? So, and my kids were at the time when they started to roll out in 2014, they were relatively young, meaning like, whatever, teenagers type thing, young teenagers type thing. And so I would make it a point of actually specifically traveling to go and see laser projectors. So like we went to you'd go to like California here. So I'd go to like Los Angeles. You'd go to like they used to call it the Chinese theater, but it was like that big one near Hollywood. Again, that was that's an IMAX institutional screen that again they converted quite early on to laser. So it was just a blast to take your kids to go and see a movie, and it's like, oh, these are my lasers in the projector here, guys. So, you know what I mean? So you'd have like it was just like a really like special treat to be able to do stuff like that. Because again, it's like, maybe you have worked on a laser that would use to like, anneal your LCD panel on your iPhone screen or something like that, which is kind of fun, but it's not like you're seeing it in action. You know what I mean? The other fun thing too was that I would always go to the annual CinemaCon convention. And again, for a laser person, this stuff is just so different, right? So you go to the CinemaCon convention, and of course I'd have like my customer meetings and things like this. But at that trade show, it's in Las Vegas. It was just a blast because it had two parts to the show. One part was the studios would have all these Hollywood A-listers show up and they do previews of all their rosters of upcoming films for the next year. So
Wow.
you'd see all these guys. It's like super fun. And the other part of it was that they'd have a little convention with all of the stuff that you buy in a theater. So popcorn, chocolate bars, everything. So you just go and again, my kids used to love it because I'd come home with, all the different types of flavoring for popcorn and different types of candy and whatnot, So it was an absolute blast to go to that one. Just so non-typical from a laser trade show, you know what I mean?
That's awesome. Yeah. I'd like to take a second to talk about 3D. In my perception, and maybe this maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong, but 3D movies, they seem to have had a few surges. Mainly, I think probably when the technology first came out. You had the red and the blue lenses. And it was cool, but it wasn't quite. There was something kind of lacking there.
Yeah.
And then, maybe around the time of the first Avatar movie, we kind of transitioned to those clear lenses, and the picture was just so much better. And as I understand it, from reading one of your actually a feature that you had written for Photonic Spectra, as I understand it, laser technology is going to give us another boost in quality for 3D movies. Can you tell us about that? And what we can expect? and some of the technology behind
Yeah.
it?
I got see that we could do a whole podcast on the 3D technology, I'm telling you. The stories behind the 3D are actually fascinating for the laser stuff. So 3D, as you had mentioned, started off with junky weirdo stuff, decades ago. Fully agree that the onset of the first Avatar movie, and in particular, what is his name? John Carpenter, I think it is, who did Avatar. I forget who did. He did the Titanic also. What's his name again?
Oh, right.
I forget the director, producer, whatever his name is. But
Yeah.
that guy literally is like a 3D fanatic. And so when that first Avatar movie came out, he insisted that, a certain percentage of the movie theaters had 3D enabled. At the time, there was a company called Real D. The company Real D had a polarization-based 3D technology. And then there was two types of polarization that you could use for the 3D at the time. One was using linear polarization. So, basically you have one is horizontal, one's vertical. And so you have these relatively inexpensive glasses to do the polarization-based 3D. Now, using linear polarization was okay, but the thing about it is, if you tilt your head one way or the other, then all of a sudden your 3D contrast, meaning the differential contrast between each eye, starts to go out of sync because you've now tilted your head and linear polarization isn't kind of doing what it's supposed to do. And the other thing about it too is you also have to maintain polarization. You also had to have silvered screens. And so literally you had to have a, silver metallic coating on your screens to hold this polarization. So Real D had this concept to do circular polarization. And so they had a rig that they put on the front of a projector that you'd have to pay typically tens of thousands of dollars for. And it would alter the polarization, but instead of doing linear, it would do circular. And so you got another pair of glasses, and it solved the head tilt problem. So if you tilted your head, it didn't actually throw the 3D contrast out of joint. So anyway, so you had to, but again, all those 3D concepts, somehow you have to separate a left eye from a right eye, and you have to generate two images. Now with digital projection, they could do this 3D, and like I say, they would very quickly project one 3D image for one eye, then another image for the other eye. They're flashing back and forth. And then Real D put this rig on the front of the projector that switched back and forth simultaneously with that to generate these two polarized images. Now, you could also put in two projectors. And then this is what people ended up doing, because with 3D, the key problem, in addition to having to put all these expensive polarization rigs on every projector, was that the brightness was cut by 75% or more. Now, the reason the brightness was cut is that from the very beginning, unless I put in two projectors, if I just used one projector, already I'm separating my left eye and right eye images, so I'm already cutting the brightness in half. And then I'm putting this polarization rig on the front, which cuts the brightness. Then I'm wearing these cheap, crappy glasses, which cuts the brightness. So instead of getting the 14-foot Lamberts that the digital cinema was requiring for these, you might get 2 or 3 foot Lamberts. So again, super dim or super expensive, because I got to put another projector in there and have two images instead of one. Then I got to align my images and all sorts of other nonsense, right? So anyways, the 3D was a huge problem. Now, early on, when I was doing this, Real D was a big customer, as was Dolby, because Real D needed brighter images to enable their 3D to be more cost effective and also be better. And so you could just, because with the lasers, again, you could scale up the brightness of your projector to an arbitrarily high number by just adding more lasers. So a typical film projector might have, say, 15, 20,000 lumens. They were making laser-based projectors with 60, 70,000 lumens because that's what was required to achieve the brightness specification that these guys were requiring. So anyway, so Real D became a big customer because, of course, the fact they wanted higher brightness for their type of polarization-based 3D. Dolby came in with a completely different idea. The Dolby idea was to use color-based separation between your eyes. Now, again, as you can imagine, if I have to have two RGB spectrums offset by about 10, 15 nanometers from each other, if I'm doing that with lamps, again, you can imagine just how ridiculously impossible that is, because by the time I filter out all of that light for each eye, I'm going to have no light left. And this is what was happening. Like I could do that type of 3D if my image was maybe like 10 meters or something like this, which would be like not even the smallest cinema screen. So with Dolby, what we did was we developed two separate spectrums of red, green, and blue offset by about 15 nanometers from each other. And then Dolby made special color filter glasses so that I'd have a separation of each eye. And again, I would flash these images back and forth. So one RGB primary followed by the other RGB primary. But again, I could scale up my brightness to be as high as I wanted it to be. And so you ended up with literally the best 3D you could possibly create. Because the glasses now, instead of being these cheap plastic polarization-based ones, were actual color filter glasses that were actual super efficient, good quality lenses. And so again, you made this amazing 3D. And IMAX also chose to implement that also. So again, when you had these, if I go back to sort of my top two projectors, the Dolby and the IMAX institutional ones, if you go see 3D with those guys, it's so much better than the polarization 3D was able to achieve.
Right. Excellent. Now, one thing I'm kind of curious about, well, actually, before we get to that, with the new 3D technology, where can we find that? Is that just sort of in those those IMAX, the IMAX legacy?
Yeah, here's the problem with the 3D. So like I said, in 2008, 9 time frame, 3D was just massively popular. And you were getting probably 20, 30% of the movies were coming out in 3D. And then they were doing a little upcharge to go see it. Like, whatever,
Right.
$3-4 extra or something like this. Honestly, it just fell out of favor. So until you had directors like, again, like when Avatar 2 came out, again, he was pushing the 3D there. No one cares about 3D anymore. I used to go to all of these digital projection summits and again, going to CinemaCon and all that kind of stuff. 2008, 9, 10, 11, even 12, more and more and more films coming out in 3D. And then they had the laser-based 3D coming out. People were super excited about it. And then all of a sudden, just every year, drop, drop, And I mean, now you hardly ever get 3D movies anymore. So I think it's just kind of, in some ways, it's just kind of going the way of the, scrap heap of technology gone lost.
Right. Right. Well, maybe maybe James Cameron will still be kind of holding on to that, hopefully.
Yeah, but James Cameron was the guy, actually. That's right. Yeah, he loved the 3D. No doubt about that.
Right. Yeah, and that might be I don't know how feasible it would be to integrate holography once that's sort of matured. That seems to be kind of the technology that's going to solve the some of the issues with 3D and being able to focus on an object without getting a headache and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. And it is true. No matter how good the 3D was in a cinema, it is definitely true that a solid 10% or so of the viewers would have to basically leave because they're getting nauseous, they're getting a headache. It just does not work for them.
Right. Yeah, that'll certainly be a contributing factor to to that.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about is, the future of large displays. Projectors, they certainly have a very long history in cinema. I can remember as a kid, looking back, in my seat at the window in the projector room, seeing that kind of cone of light coming out, just kind of being, kind of mesmerized by, that technology and stuff. By incorporating laser technology, at what level are we able to, kind of keep up with, OLED displays, and, will we be able to keep up with micro LEDs? I know those seem to be gaining a lot of interest in terms of, these very large displays.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I would say that OLED is not the concern for cinema, but I would say that micro LED is. Now, by that, what I mean is that the micro LED guys, such as Samsung, actually started to install some cinemas as long as like 4 or 5 years ago. Now, the hype at the time was that they were going to start transitioning and they were going to start with the smaller screens. Like, it's interesting, like with lasers, it started with the biggest screens because, again, lasers were overcoming these brightness issues and these image quality issues, and that lent itself to them going into the biggest screens first. The micro LEDs, on the flip side, the bigger the screen, the more micro LEDs I have to have, the more expensive it is. So the micro LEDs were starting with the smallest screens. And just cost-wise, they're relatively prohibitive. So, and again, OLED is just a different type of technology that the pixels for a cinema are still quite large, generally speaking. And so an OLED doesn't lend itself to that very well because the pixels tend to be quite small for an OLED panel. But again, for micro LEDs, definitely, if you start to see commercial TVs like your 65-inch home TV, if those start to transition towards micro LED, then I could see that taking over the cinema market because, again, those guys, you just end up titling them to make your cinema, right? So you'll just basically arrange them just like they do now in these tiles to scale up the size of it. But again, they would take over the small screens first, and they are really good. They would take the advantages of that the laser offered and just increase it even more, because you would get that great corner to corner sharpness, you would get fantastic color, you would get even brighter brightness, and again, your blacks would be super black. This is the type of thing that makes a cinema viewing experience really good. But like, again, I think there's probably like something like 10 or 20 of them installed worldwide. They've just been prohibitively expensive. And if you got about like about 140,000 some odd cinemas worldwide right now. So having, 10 or 20 of them installed is just literally beta sites. But again, that is a very compelling thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in time it gets there. But it's all about scaling up the cost of that. Well, I guess scaling down the cost of it, because it's just so prohibitively expensive to get a large image when I can have a single projector that can cover that whole image for roughly $100,000 is about what a laser projector would cost you. So if you tiled a bunch of those TVs, in essence, it's a TV, right? Those would have to be, sub $2,000 for a micro LED TV type of thing. LCDs, you can do that. You can achieve that price point. But micro LEDs are nowhere near that yet.
Right. Now, of course, we want to get to the so sort of the reason that you're here. You attended the Academy Awards, the technical ones. Can you tell us about what was the ceremony like? What are some of those notable moments? And what did it feel like to be, standing among fellow innovators, many in photonics who they've helped to improve and preserve the cinematic experience. It sounds like you're a bit of a movie guy, so this must have been really exciting.
Yeah, and like so most people don't know. I mean, some people kind of know this, but most people don't. Like, because they've had technical, what they call like the technical Oscars for decades, right? And it always happens a couple of weeks before what I would call the real Oscars, like with all the actors and producers and directors and whatnot, right? So I've known about it for a while, and then one of the things that actually happened about 5 years ago now, I think it was probably 2019, 2020, 4 or 5 years ago, I got an email from this technical panel. I kind of knew this was happening because people like IMAX and Dolby and whatnot, they had put forward their nominations for trying to get a technical award for their laser projectors. And I remember being interviewed by this technical panel, and one of the first things I got to say about these guys is like they were impressive. So I've been like part of other sort of award ceremonies and panels and stuff like that before, and I've won a couple Prism Awards, for example, that the SPIE does every year. But these guys, I mean, they were asking questions, and then I would give an answer, and then they would take that and ask like an even better question and follow-up questions. And I'm like, wow, these guys actually get it, because it's not very normal to talk to someone about lasers and what the lasers can do for the projectors and have them actually understand it, and then actually take that answer to your question and ask an even better, more pointed follow-up question on it. So like the whole process started off back then, and then it just, these technical Oscars, they don't give them out right away. Like for the movie guys, they give them out that year. So, we just had the Oscars, and it was for all the movies that were in the last year. Like the technical Oscars, they don't give you anything until they see that it survives the test of time. And so, for example, like 3D has not survived the test of time. They're not giving out any technical awards for 3D because no one cares anymore. Now, this year, what they did was they gave out a bunch of awards, and they sort of like aggregated a bunch of laser innovations. And I remember in mid-December, I got an email that I thought at first was spam because it was, Science and Technical Award or something. I said I didn't even like pay attention to it at first, but then I started looking at it and I'm like, oh. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like they wanted to actually give myself an award. I was like really like overwhelmed and shocked and obviously happy. And then I phoned up one of the guys who I know who's involved in that process, and I asked him, I said, how did this come about? Because again, I totally understand that the projectors got it, but I guess he told me that when this technical panel, who I've already mentioned, was like really impressive people, when they were doing all these interviews, they realized that the laser projectors were innovative, but it's also the lasers that went into the projectors that were innovative, and that people had spent literally decades and tens or hundreds of millions of dollars developing these lasers. And so again, the fact that they recognized this innovation, I thought was pretty impressive. And so they picked out 3 laser people, and they picked out 3 laser projectors to receive awards. And so the ceremony was, literally incredible. So I did not know, I had no idea before going in there what would actually happen. Like no idea. And so I got a little bit of an agenda like the week before. And from like 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, they had this sort of like arrival time where all the award winners would get like rows that they would like pin to their lapel. And so you kind of knew who at that place was getting an award. And then they had like the crazy, red carpet, and they're taking pictures and all that great stuff. But then you go into the actual ceremony itself, and it was at the Academy of Arts and Sciences Museum in kind of in the Beverly Hills area, Beverly Hills, Hollywood kind of border there. And the facility is absolutely fantastic. And then what they did was really cool too, because there's they don't give out very many technical awards. Like normally they give about 8 to 10 a year. And so what they do for each of those segments is they'll do like an introduction to that. And they typically have like a Hollywood A-lister, and they've done some video and whatnot, showing the technology, showing how it works, a little bit of an interview with the person. And then they'll have, then they'll announce it. The person comes up, they get their little award, then go sit down again. So I was like actually quite nervous because, it was like kind of like a big deal. And I had invited, like my wife was there with me, and I had 2 of my kids. I got 4 kids. 2 of my kids were with me, and then my parents were there. And then I also invited one of my former coworkers because he's the guy that had really helped build all the lasers initially, right? And so the ceremony was just so well scripted. They have a great MC. They have all these lovely, amazing videos in this absolutely amazing theater. The Dolby laser projector was the projector that they were using for the event. So it's kind of this great tie-in, right? And it's a formal event. Everyone's wearing tuxes. Everyone's so happy. So you go through this whole thing. And then because they had all of the laser guys kind of congregated into one special night as part of this awards, it was all my old buddies, right? So all my old friends from IMAX were there, my friends from Dolby were there, my friends from Barco were there. So it was like this little mini laser projection reunion, because this is the people that I'd worked with for like 20 years to get all this stuff to market. And you've just been, you know, through all these battles with them getting these products launched. So super fun ceremony. And then they do the after party, and you go to like the big sort of convention hall that they have there. I mean, just crazy. Like, food was amazing, drinks were amazing, top shelf, great service. I mean, just this massive party afterwards, which was super festive, super entertaining, super well done. I mean, it was really a night like no other, something that you just kind of remember it forever as a really special event.
With that, we conclude another episode of All Things Photonics. Thank you to our sponsors, to the technical staff behind the scenes, and to continued support from the Photonics Media editorial team. As always, questions, comments, thoughts, and ideas are welcome. Let us know how we're doing via email at allthings@photonics.com. All Things Photonics is available on all major platforms and on our website, photonics.com.